So at the age of 24, guys, I bought my first property. And sometimes I get emotional about things like that because in reality, I got extremely lucky in life with the family I was raised under, God specifically. I just got lucky overall. And I'm not making this video to show off. I'm making this video to tell you, yo, if I could do it, this thing is also possible for you to actually be able to do it. Now, in reality, I remember this one quote that changed my life forever. And it's that true wealth tends to be very invisible. And I never really understood that. But true wealth basically means it's all those things you opted not to buy. It's why, for example, whenever I saw people driving very nice cars, living in very fancy homes, and I have people like this in my families, and I know their net worth, and it's usually negative, I never understood, like, why do the people that have the least amount of money on average tend to spend the most, while the people that have, for example, the most amount of money tend to have really just more of an average normal life, and they have a lot of wealth, a lot of options, but they choose to just have that wealth there compound and compound. You know, one of my favorite examples is Warren Buffett. The guy is a billionaire, but he pays himself $100K a year, and he lives in the same house he did 30 years ago. And to him, that's a pretty awesome life. And to me, that's also a pretty awesome life. Now, I wish I could say, guys, I'm so smart. I did this at 24 years old. I did it by myself. But in reality, it came down to God. It came down to my mom. And it came down to the mentors that I have that I never even met. Like people like Warren Buffett, people like Thomas J. Stanley, and people also like Charlie Munger. And all these people showed me that basically Warren Buffett, doing the things you love really do pay off. Thomas J. Stanley taught me the truth when it comes to building wealth and the real millionaires in this country. Number 3, Charlie Munger taught me that it's okay to change your mind and your whole goal is just to remove a piece of ignorance every single day. And those concepts changed my life forever. And in this video, I'm going to tell you exactly the steps that I went through when it came to buy my very first property. And just a few days ago, I was actually going to go ahead and buy my second property, but thankfully I did not go through with that deal because it would have been terrible, horrific in reality. I'll tell you more about that maybe at the end of the video. And as always, guys, like this video. I appreciate it a ton. On top, if you're new here, subscribe, hit the bell so you're notified. New content on real estate, on investing, and especially stock stuff, which I basically love to talk about. Now, the very first thing, guys, is I realized that I had this massive disconnect between what I wanted and also what I needed. Since I was about like 19 years old, my whole thought was basically I need to have this big house, at least $500,000. I wanted to have this car that was like $200,000. I wanted this fancy wife. I wanted all these things that made absolutely no sense because they really didn't have any substance. I had nothing to do with true happiness. However, the rules that I followed were very simple, and it did not come from me initially. They came from Thomas J. Stanley. And Thomas J. Stanley is the author of The Millionaire Next Door and also another book called, for example, Stop Acting Rich. And he teaches us in this book that basically the real millionaires in this country, well, they're not what you think they actually are. And they don't spend as much money as you probably think they do. So for example, I learned that basically the average millionaire buys a home that's less than $300,000. I also learned that the average home is like less than 20% of the actual net worth that they actually have. And on top of that, I also learned that when they basically buy a home, it's usually no more than double their household income. And all those things made me think so much. And I realized that if people just go about using these rules, they will be so much better off in life. And you might say, Tommy, well, that's not possible in every single country. Well, not country, what I say, in every single state, for example, like California, New York, and Texas. And I realized that people that are usually wealthy are able just to change their circumstances and say, hey, I'm not going to live here. I might move over here, or I might do this. I might do this differently. It's all about being flexible enough to find something that fits with what you want in life. Now, I also added some additional rules to what Jay Stanley taught me. And it was basically, first of all, I wanted to buy a home that was no more than 33% of my monthly income. This way, if something bad happens, I knew I was going to be able to make 30% of my income to be able to pay this mortgage. On top of that, I wanted to limit it to 15 years, the mortgage 15 years, because basically, if I made it a 30-year mortgage, That doubles almost my buying power. And I didn't want to buy something big. I wanted to buy something I could afford. On top of that, I wanted to be able to put down 20% of the down payment to avoid, for example, private mortgage insurance, which to me was very important. But putting down 10% is more than enough. Now, once I got all these factors here, again, the disconnect in my head started to get smaller and smaller and smaller. I realized that although, for example, I could get approved for a very big mortgage, that was not really going to fit the profile of what the average millionaire does. And my concept when it comes to money is very simple. Monkey see, monkey do. It usually works best, like butter. Because if I do what other people don't do that are rich and I try to make that thing different, it really doesn't make any sense because basically you're going against the grain with something that works. Sometimes it's good, but with things like this, you want to be very careful. So I instantly limited my house search. I wasn't looking for a home that was in $300,000 territory because I knew on average they don't buy that. $400,000, $500,000, all those possibilities were basically erased. And I stuck to around $200,000 and below. And I also wanted to live in a neighborhood, blue collar people, people that had normal jobs, because I knew for a fact that if I lived around people that were kind of fancy, eventually I would want to be fancy too, because usually the crowd, the herd, tends to overcome the one. It just tends to happen. So I wanted to live in a place where if I came in a Lamborghini, I would feel uncomfortable. If I came in a Mercedes, I would feel uncomfortable. I wanted to be discriminated because I knew for a fact that was gonna help me build wealth. So all of my neighbors, they're basically in their 50s. They drive Toyotas and Hondas. Some of them do have nice cars, but it's usually not Mercedes, none of that stuff. They work normal jobs. I love it. I love where I live. Because these people, they're very nice, and it's not about appearances or anything like that. Everyone is so nice. And to me, that means a lot. Now, second thing was, I found a property. The property I found was about $130,000. I knew the last time it sold for like around $166,000. So I knew, hey, I can put in some money into this property, it can hold it, and I can basically have the property exactly how I want it. Now, when I bought this property, a lot of things did not go as planned. I found out there were a lot of electrical problems, a problem here, a problem there, and in real estate, that cost a lot of money. Over $10,000 to $15,000 in unknowns, and that is quite a hefty buck. Now, about $60,000 later, and I finally have the property exactly how I want it. I'm very happy here. And by the way, this is the property. This is my studio. And I have a video coming soon, basically revealing the property and everything like that. So stay tuned for that and make sure you subscribe to the channel. Now, here's the math, guys. All in all, I made this property for about $190,000. Which basically means, let me come over here so you can actually see exactly what I'm talking about. But overall, if you come here, you can see that basically $109,000, 20% is $38,000, 15-year mortgage, 5%. And on top of that, I'm looking at around $1,252 per month as far as a mortgage. Now, you might say, Tommy, well, what about property taxes? Well, because I live in this neighborhood, guess what? I don't pay any property taxes. If I live, for example, in a fancy neighborhood, I would have paid property taxes. PMI is 0, HOA is 0, and that's homeowner insurance like around $50, and that's basically it. And to me, this is actually pretty doable because it's not, for example, it's not even close to being, for example, 30% of my income. It's more like on an average, maybe like less than 10% and so on. And that's awesome that I have a good income or whatever, but that's not the point. The point is that I limited my possibilities on basically buying something massive I can qualify for, and I limited it to something that I can actually afford to own as fast as possible. Now, the cool thing is that because since I was about 19 years old, I've been saving money up, and I've basically been very smart with my money, not wasting it, not taking a lot of risks and so on. I was able to actually pay for this property in cash. So I don't have a mortgage to worry about. I don't have any payments. This property is all mine. And the scary thing is that whenever you're going to go ahead and buy a property, whether it's in cash or anything like that, you always want to make sure you have some extra money set aside because something will pop up and you will need to do something. And by the way, one big mistake I made with this property was sometimes you want to be fancy and make this like this and make that like that. Be careful with that stuff, okay? Remember, the average person tends to move from a property every 5 years. Do I think this is my forever home? I don't have a problem with it being a forever home. There's enough rooms in here for a whole family. I'm pretty good with it. But overall, it might not be. So don't make your remodel as far as like, I'm gonna be here forever. I wanted to make sure that when I remodel this property, I made it as vanilla as possible, basically something anyone would like. So when the time came for me to sell it, potentially, I could sell it to absolutely anyone out there. And that to me was very important. Now, one thing deterred me from making big mistakes here, and is that I saw people in my family make big mistakes. I saw people buy not what they needed, but buy what they wanted. I saw my grandpa buy a home for a 30-year mortgage, very expensive, and he can't retire just yet. And his entire retirement is in the value of his home. And if it falls, he's not going to be doing that well. And that's the whole idea. I wanted to make sure that the home I bought gave me what I needed, and it wasn't about what I wanted or anything like that. Because in reality, a home is not going to make you any happier. And by the way, guys, I will say something. I noticed that along the way, I was designing my life with a lot of fancy gold chains. And gold chains look cool, but at the end of the day, they just hold you back. They keep you trapped. They keep you enslaved in a way. I didn't want to have a home that I couldn't afford. I didn't want to have a car I couldn't afford. I didn't want any of those things. And that's why I drive a Toyota. I live in a normal neighborhood. My house is not the best house ever, but it's the best house to me because I own it. And that's what's important to me. Now, the third thing, guys, is that the most important things to me, and I think this is very important to you when you're looking for a home, when you're answering these questions, is what do you really care about? And what I care about the most is I want financial freedom as fast as possible. That was my goal. On top of that, I wanted to feel comfortable, and I wanted to have, for example, a solid foundation, meaning, for example, I can operate now from a level of confidence knowing, hey, no matter what happens, I'm not going to lose my home because I own this home. And to me, that's very important. It gives me a lot of confidence. And on top of that, lastly, I don't care about people's opinions. I don't care if somebody comes here and says, Tommy, you know, your house can be nicer. You can buy this instead. I don't care. And I don't think the people that say those things usually aren't looking for your best interests. And overall, guys, I will say one thing. I'm not making this video to show off. I'm making this video to tell you it's possible. And you might say, Tommy, well, I can't pay cash for a home. The answer is you're not supposed to be able to. It's not the point of this video. The point of this video is basically you'll limit yourself to buy something you can ask you for it and use the information to benefit you. And the overall rules are simple. You buy something on a 15-year mortgage, you save up 10 to 20%, and on top of that, you make just no more than a third, 30% of your monthly income. And you can find a home like this. And if you can actually pay some extra money towards it, you can be done with it in 7 to 10 years. And that's still a lot better than the average person by far. And once you have a home, you have a solid foundation, you have extra cash flow to spend whatever you want. Life is just a lot more different. Now, that's a lot better than going out there and buying a 30-year home, pushing your budget to the limits, living a very fancy lifestyle, but always living on the edge. I never wanted that. Not for me, not for my future kids, or my future wife. That's the whole idea, guys, okay? But guys, I hope this video actually helped you in some way. And the whole point is you can start your life with certain plans, but as you receive new information, you have to be able to make changes. And that's what I did. And that's why I don't have some fancy home today. I have the home that I need. Guys, as always, guys, thanks for watching. Comment down below house if you made it all the way to the end of the video. Actually, comment down below home if you made it all the way to the end of the video. And also let me know exactly when are you going to buy a house? Are you thinking about it? You're not thinking about it? And by the way, the perfect time to buy a house is when you need one. It's not like you're 24, buy a house, 25, buy a house. No, I bought a house because it made sense for me and it's what I wanted to do. But I wouldn't have bought a house if I didn't need a house and if I didn't want a house. It's not just like the next step. No, it's not that at all. You buy it when you need one, okay? As always, guys, like, subscribe, hit the bell so you get notified. Up here is another video. Over here's my face. Please subscribe. And by the way, I will say one last thing before I leave. A house is not an investment. I put money into this property, and yeah, it's going to go up in value. But in reality, when something breaks, I have to repair it. I have to pay this, I have to pay that. And over time, when the value is X, and I basically profit something, all those profits are basically eaten up by all the repairs I have to make in this house, right? Over that long period of time. So a home is more like a security. It's a tool. So don't think whatever I put in here doesn't matter. It matters. All right. Peace.